Well, welcome back. You know, I'm in my best form when I get a chance to interact with you, share with you as much as we possibly can. Four shots, heads, and oh, we might as well throw in another topic, brass.
Come all you moonshiners if you want to hear about the
Now, a few
carnival
videos
that's
ago,
around here.
I put out a call and said, look, hey, if you want us to highlight your still or your system on a video, an upcoming video, well, send it in to us and let us know, talk about it, tell me all about it. Here's one that we got from Chuck. Now, Chuck got this still he set up, and it looks like he's made some modifications himself. He's got some manufactured parts, but he's got some modifications. Chuck, you've done a great job of putting this thing together. I'll tell you, I can see the manipulation in there, and also I love the column with all the packing, nice and loose and very effective. Chuck claims that he can pump out 194 proof on all of his runs. He's obviously using a PID controller. I can see that by the thermocouple that he's got attached to it. And Chuck, you've done a good thing here, my friend. Keep up the good work. Well, okay, we've got all of that out of the way. And oh yes, I know you want to do so. You know you do. Subscribe. Share us with your friends, and of course, comment below. You know that we do not edit or delete any comments. But if you disagree, you have a comment, you have some advice, you have some information you want to share with the community, please feel free to do so. I know I appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone else in the community does as well. So, on to what we're here for today. I am working on the parrot head, but I'm going to take a break because the number of phone calls and the number of emails, of which you'll see I've got it up, I've got a lot to go through. I've got probably about 300 emails to go through, and I'll get to them. Sometimes we kind of get stuck on the folklore, you know, the myths, you know, those things that kind of keep us back. I don't know what it is. It's got to be something to do with the secret recipes. You know, someone wants to hold all that information, but they'll only tell you a little bit. They're going to tell you everything they want you to know, not everything they know. Go figure. But here, what we want to do is we want to make sure we're as transparent as possible. Now, I get a question all the time about methanol. I want to show you something. I just want to demonstrate this. One empty quart jar, okay? And we're going to talk about, here it is, we're going to talk about 5-gallon batch, okay? 5 gallons. Alexa, what is 5 gallons in liters?
5 gallons is about 18.9 liters.
Okay, 18.9 liters. Now that's the mash volume that we're going to discuss. And when I describe this, yes, this is a linear problem, meaning that in 10 gallons, you just double it. In 15 gallons, you triple it. You know, it's linear. It just goes up proportionately, okay? So, in a 5-gallon batch, how much methanol, and oh, by the way, yeah, good question. How much methanol can I expect to collect, and do I have to dispose of? Well, of course, it all depends totally on what your mash content is. But we have a figure for everyone. And just keep this in mind. This is really, really, really easy, okay? 2 ounces. I'm going to show you this. 2 ounces per 5 gallons, okay? And then you collect that. That's the first thing that comes off. There's nothing there. It's physically impossible for you to not collect the first 2 ounces because it comes off first. It happens at 145 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to happen whether you like it or not. Now, 2 things may happen here. One is you have no methanol in your mash. Is that possible? Absolutely. A sugar wash has little to none. I'll say that again, little to none. All right, your grain recipes will have an attributable amount. Of course, less than 2 ounces. And your fruit mashes, which will produce the majority of the methanol. But in each of those cases, we know that 2 ounces is enough to collect on the very front end to toss. I hope I've made that point very clear, okay? We say 2 ounces only because we want you to have that safety margin. You're not going to have 2 ounces in there, but we want you to collect. Now, keep this in mind. This really, really drives the point home because the methanol scare is kind of crazy. When we make beer, wine, and then we're going to make whiskey, we make it all the same way. What do you think happens to this 2 ounces in the beer? Fair question. Well, it goes into all the bottles. It's not separated. We don't concern ourselves with it. We're like, oh, doesn't matter. We don't care. When we're making wine, what happens to the 2 ounces? Well, yeah, we put it in the bottles and we serve it up. We share it with our friends. We sell it in the store. I mean, the bottom line is we don't concern ourselves with it. But by golly, when we're making a mash, oh, you'll go blind. Now, they're all three made the same way. They're all three fermentable sugars, water, and yeast. I mean, how much more simple can you get? So we've got that 2 ounces. The reason we separate it is because we know two things. One, we can. I mean, it's going to happen first, my friends. Collect it, toss it. You're safe. Number two, we attribute this to the hangovers and the headaches that you get. Without that, you'll hear many, many people claim, and rightfully so, you drink moonshine, I never have a hangover. You drink a good, clean, clear moonshine, you won't have a hangover. Now, this is called the Fore shots. These are the things, and again, remember, they come off at 145 degrees. It's the first thing that happens. Remember, in order for you to get to your distilling temperature, which is at sea level, like 173.8 for the ethanol separation from water. I mean, I don't want to get technical, but in order to get to 173.8, guess what? You have to go past 145. That's why I say that there's nothing you can do. You can't stop it. It's going to happen on its own. Great. Great. We've got this far. Now, I want to show you one other thing. Heads. I have heard everything from 20% to 2 quarts to in a 5-gallon batch, which is a little bit, 2 quarts is a little bit less than 2 liters. I have heard it all. Look, let your conscience be your guide, and you make your cuts where you want to make them. I'll show you where I make my cuts, and that is twice the amount of my Fore shots is normally my heads. So this, my friends, represents, when I run a still, this represents my Fore shots and heads. There are times when my heads will be a little bit larger, but very seldom will they be any less than that. Now, how do we tell when we're away from the heads? This is a really, really good point to drive home. The only real clear, well, there's 2 clear ways to do that. One is by taste and odor. The second method is actual measurement, okay? Your spirits will be of a higher proof during your heads. So let's say, for instance, you've got, it's hard to do this with a 5-gallon batch, remember. If you're using a parrot, and a parrot's just a device that holds the hydrometer so that you can test the proof during the run. And while you're doing that, if you've got like a 10-gallon batch that you're running and your parrot fills up, you'll notice at the very beginning, let's say, for instance, it's a pot still, and you're running it, and you've got like 163 proof. You're like, whoa, that's pretty good. As soon as it drops, and it'll go from 163 like to 160, you know that that's the end of the heads. That's a clear delineation between because your heads has the highest proof of alcohol because of all of the other byproducts that are found in the heads. I mean, it's that clear and that simple. Very same thing, the same thing is true if you're running a reflux still correctly, but it's a little bit more delicate with that balance because you are controlling the separation, all right? So just remember, if you're running 5 gallons, the first 2 ounces, and then 4 ounces after that, I'm good. If you're running 10 gallons, what's it? The first 4 ounces, and 8 ounces. It doesn't get any easier than that, okay? Glad we got a chance to cover that. Now, brass. Here's the magic question. Can you use brass in your distilling process? Now, I know this will be very, very controversial. I mean, we talked about aluminum once, and we busted the myth on aluminum because, yes, you can use aluminum, and please don't write in and tell, well, go ahead, yeah, write in, I don't care, and tell me that aluminum leaches because we already know that it doesn't, okay? We already know that aluminum causes Alzheimer's. We already know that that myth has been busted years ago. Believe what you want to believe. Find what you want to find on the internet. Do some scholarly research before you make some false claims. That's all I can offer. But aluminum does not leach. Okay, aluminum is perfectly safe to use for distilling. Now, what about brass? Brass fittings, brass couplings. You know, up until if you do, I did some research from the 111th Congress. I did some searching, and I did some research, did some studying. I've done this for quite a while now. And so I've got the law written that was passed by the 111th Congress that on January 4th, 2011, and it went into effect January of 2014. So it's been a while, okay? I can understand where people get the attitude or they will restate, can't use brass, period. Brass is bad. You're right. Brass is bad, especially the brass that was produced prior to this going into effect. You have 2 types of brass, okay? Here we go, we got it. You ready? We've got lead-free brass and we've got 0 lead brass. There is a difference, okay? Lead-free brass, first of all, by definition, up until 2014, could be produced and utilized in potable water. That means drinkable water and a drinkable water source. Whether that be hot water or cold water makes no difference, but it's in a potable water supply. At that point, it could have up to 8% lead in it. That's unfathomable because we already know that lead does have an adverse effect on the human body. It's like introducing a poison and it does leach out of the lines. Well, that's lead free. Imagine that. But Congress got the EU even, now the EU has a tighter standard. In the European Union, lead free or 0 lead is now no more than 0.1% lead because it's very difficult to get 100% of the lead out. But and there's just a long discussion about how brass is made. Now, in the United States, through the 111th Congress, now 0 lead, the definition for 0 lead is no more than 0.25, 1/4% of lead on the wetted surface of fittings. That's a perceptible but a very, very low amount. Now, this all boils down to are you risk averse or are you risk avoider? Look, you're going to find lead in a lot of things that you were not prepared to find lead in, but there's almost no way. It's almost like getting unlimited bandwidth. No such thing, okay? 0 lead, no lead period is almost an impossible thing. So how do we discern the differences? How do we tell the differences? Now, would I use brass? I would use the zero lead brass fittings in a still system. I would not use the no lead, because the no lead can still be utilized, can still be purchased on the market, but it must be used for non-potable water, affluent water, or something that's not going to be consumed by the human body. Okay? So any water source in the United States now, through transmission all the way down to the end tap, must be zero lead fittings and piping throughout, and also flux and solder throughout the entire system. And that's what keeps us safe. So can you use it in a still system? My opinion is yes. There are many who are risk averse or who are risk avoiders who will say, no lead whatsoever. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I would use a brass fitting. It's totally up to you. Now, how do we tell the difference? That's the key. The key to this is, how do you tell the difference? Well, besides them being marked with a tag, you can't always trust tags. We've all seen the wrong price before. How do you tell the difference? Well, here's a picture of a no lead brass fitting. And you'll notice where the black arrows are, they indicate, you see those two grooves? And there's a male, and then there's the female. And you see the two grooves that have been cut out. That's the easiest way to identify the no lead. They have two grooves that are cut out to identify them. And a lot of people are not aware of that. So how do we identify the zero lead? Well, the zero lead, here, check this out. The zero lead has a single ridge cut around the inside, and that's the easiest way to tell the difference. If you're really, really sharp, you'll probably notice a different shine, more of a silvery color as opposed to a copperish brass color on the fitting itself. But that's not always true. Always rely on the manufacturer's requirement and responsibility to cut the grooves in these brass fittings in order to identify whether they are no lead with 2 rings or zero lead with 1 ring. See, I'm so glad I was able to share that with you. Now, you make up your own mind. I am not saying that up front that lead is absolutely safe. But I'm not going to be a risk avoider and go, I'm not touching that brass fitting when it's made and all my water comes through it and everything else. You follow me. Last but not least, you know I've got to get back to these emails. I have a request. If you're going to send an email and you have a question, please state your question and we'll get right at it, okay? But if you write me a paragraph, or if I look through when I open it up and I see a bunch of question marks, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm going to move on to the next email. If you describe a whole bunch of stuff in a bunch of paragraphs and tell me a story and then say, George, and your last question is, what are your thoughts? At that point, I don't have any. I'm sorry. All right? So let's keep the lines of communication open and let's practice brevity. Until next time, happy distilling.